boy, am I glad to see you. Those beautiful faces, beautiful people. And you know, we're in this gorgeous sanctuary, but I invite us to remember that this sanctuary isn't a sanctuary until you step into it. It's the wonderful people here that help create this space where transformation happens, where an experience of the sacred happens, where inspiration happens. So thank you for coming here for you, but for the rest of us as well, right? And I'm so grateful to be here, so grateful to have the opportunity to speak as part of this wonderful series on rising above. So I'm grateful to Dr. Roger. And we're rising above, but we're also talking about the basics of our teaching. And you know, the thing here is we call ourselves a lot of names, don't we? We're a Mile High Church, not that kind of name, sorry. We're Mile High Church. We're a Center for Spiritual Living. We're Science of Mind. And can anyone tell me what denomination we are? If you said religious science, you win the prize. And if you'd like, you can say that with me. I am a religious scientist.
I am a religious scientist.
How does that feel? Does that feel all right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like a Scientologist when you say that? And for those of you who've been in this movement for a long time, you know one of the most difficult questions to answer is, what is religious science anyways? And it's not that it's so hard to explain, it's just that we're different, right? It's different here. We're not so much a doctrine as we are promoting a way of life. And we're not so much about welcoming all people so we can convince you to think just like us. We're about bringing together a diverse group of individuals, recognizing we all think a little differently, and we explore these great principles together. And we keep an open mind. I love an old joke that illustrates this. There's a white man and a black man, and they're close friends, but they always argue about God. And the white guy thinks that God is a white man. And the black guy is quite sure that God is a black man. And they stay friends throughout the decades. And then they both pass away on the same day, like Jefferson and Adams. And they find themselves in heaven, thankfully, and they're outside of a waiting room, and they get to meet God. Can you believe it? We get to meet God. Too bad they don't have money in heaven, so we can't put a bet on this. And they finally walk in the waiting room, and there's God, and she shakes their hands and says, "Buenos dias, señores." Yeah, thank you, Mike. And for me, this illustrates well who we are, because we welcome all perspectives on the divine, but we always stay open at the top. We always reserve the rights to change our minds a little bit, to be inspired by something new. Ernest Holmes was actually asked to define religious science once in 25 words or less. Smart person. Make it plain, Ernest. And he came up with 25 words. He said, religious science is a correlation of laws of science, opinions of philosophy, and revelations of religion applied to human needs and the aspirations of man. Pretty good, right? Yeah. Laws of science, opinions of philosophy, revelations of religion. What is laws of science supposed to mean? Well, to me, one of the things that it means is that we, in our church, we embrace science. We love science. We see science as a way of seeking to prove the truths about God, the principles of unity and of oneness. We have no problem seeing God in evolution. We aren't offended when we look at the beautiful earth to realize that it's not at the center of the solar system. You know, we can look at our beautiful planet and see that it's this flaming gas ball moving very quickly, but that it's also a part of this infinite space. What a great lesson about God, right? No beginning, no apparent ending, just infinite space and infinite expression. We can look at the cosmos and see God in expression in the largest space there is, and then we can look at some of the tiniest things that there are. The human genome. We can look at this tiniest expression that helps create us all. And I don't know about you, but I also see infinity when I see that. When I see something like that, the question for me isn't, do I believe in God? It's how can I not believe in God? How can I not believe in the sacred? How can I not feel in awe that I'm a part of something so strong and true, yet is still such an amazing mystery? So it's our work in Science of Mind to see life as a laboratory, to prove to ourselves the existence of the sacred. There's a recent book out called It's All Relative by A.J. Jacobs. And it's all about the study of DNA and realizing we really are one. We truly are all related. Jacobs, who's a Jewish guy from Brooklyn, realizes that Barack Obama is his 12th cousin. He sits his wife gently down and explains to her that they're fifth cousins. We're all one. He decides that he's going to put on the world's largest family reunion and invites everybody, even hires Sister Sledge to sing, "We Are Family." Come on, everybody. And it's so interesting to look into this science that proves that we're one. You know, I want instant DNA results so we can set up a booth at white supremacist rallies. So pardon me, would you like to sign up for a little test here? Hold on a minute. I've got some interesting news. You're not going to believe this. So that's the science of religious science. What about the philosophy, opinions of philosophy? And we're open at the top here, right? I know this is corny, but I can't help myself. We're open at the top. You want to do this with me? Open at the top. Open from the bottom. Open from the side. And open from within. See, you didn't know the Village people were religious scientists. You know, expression of diversity. But for me, philosophy is such an important part of our teaching. And here's the key part. We don't discriminate against wisdom. We don't discriminate against wisdom. We want wisdom no matter who it comes from. If it came to us from a text 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, great. If it comes from your crazy Uncle Rick, great. If it comes from your everyday life, great. If it comes from Socrates or Muhammad or Buddha, great. Do not discriminate against wisdom. And that's what we are. We're not a philosophy that's dead. We're a philosophy that's alive, that's always evolving, and we all contribute to it. Kenneth Burke, a philosopher, described philosophy as the unending conversation. The unending conversation. I love that's why I think our classes here are so important, because they're not about telling you what to believe. They're about digging into life's questions together and leaving better because of it. Burke uses the following analogy. He says, imagine that you go to meet some friends at a tavern, and when you get there, you realize that you've arrived late. The conversation is going around the table, and it's lively. So you get your drink, big Coors Light, chai tea latte, whatever your preference, and you sit down and you listen in on what's being said. And when you feel it's time, you chime in. You share from your own experience. You put in your own 2 cents. There's people that agree with you. There's people who see it a different way. And you keep on talking. And then the hour starts to grow late. You're tired. You finish your drink. And you leave. But the conversation continues. I love that as religious scientists. We are contributing valuable ideas to the conversation. And I don't know about you, but in a lot of our families, in a lot of our communities, and in our country, we need an up-leveling of the conversation. We need to rise above the tribalism and divisiveness. We need to rise above, as Roger was saying, the BS and the nonsense. We need to rise above and recognize when we don't think for ourselves, we are allowing someone or something else to think for us. what you think and what you have to say is important. I get upset about that rule that you can't talk about religion or politics, because that's all I love to talk about. But I wonder why. I wonder if it isn't that we don't say that because we don't want to offend people, but because we haven't fully thought out our own opinions, or because we're not really willing to listen. And this conversation we all share is so important because it speaks to how we want to evolve as a people and as individuals and as spouses and as parents. So religious science is all about up-leveling the conversation. What about this revelations of religion business? In our teaching, we believe that there's a mystical thread in all religions. Some of them you may have to dig a little deeper in, but every faith at some level, there are teachers who speak about experiencing the divine within. We usually side with the teachers themselves who wanted to awake humanity, and then unfortunately they usually get murdered for their efforts. And then their followers often start spreading the philosophy, sometimes to raise power or for political reasons, right? And we get stuck in that. But for us, we'll say something like there are many paths to God, and what that doesn't mean is that we agree with every aspect of religion. We just honor that mystical aspect in all faiths. You'll never hear Dr. Roger declare a fatwa. We reject the notion that life is a test created by a God who would want to judge your soul, who would think that you are anything less than beautiful or magnificent. We reject discrimination at any level that would deny a female leadership or excommunicate someone for being gay or for being divorced or whatever it may be. We reject those ideas, but we embrace divine truth in all religious faiths. We honor that. We love someone like the great Gandhi, who this upcoming Tuesday will mark 70 years since he was assassinated. 70 years. And one of the things that Gandhi did is he read the Sermon on the Mount. As a Hindu, he embraced Jesus' message, and he came up with something he called satyagraha, which meant soul force. It was that practice of nonviolence that helped bring and take away the British Empire from India. And then he struggled to keep his people together. Some of them were Hindus, some of them were Muslims. And one of the most powerful stories that it's told is not too long before Gandhi was killed, a Hindu couple came to him and had shared that they had been a part of a riot that had killed Muslim parents and left the child an orphan. And what did Gandhi say to them? He said, take that child on as your own and raise him in the religion of his parents. That's some radical inclusion right there. That's the power of honoring our faith and recognizing it's not just what you believe in, it's how you live your life. It's how we treat one another. Religions don't divide us, they're just different languages trying to express the same thing. And it's all about these values of love, inclusivity, and strength that keep us going. We're talking back to basics, and Ernest Holmes is the founder of our church. But someone who is very influential as well is a man named William Hornaday, Bill Hornaday. And where Ernest didn't really want to start a church, if you studied this, it was Hornaday who kind of helped make it that way. And Bill was born to be a minister. His grandfather was a Methodist minister. His dad was a Methodist minister, and he was going to be a Methodist minister. He was so dedicated that he learned Chinese, and he traveled to China on a mission to help bring folks to the Lord. And it was a powerful and transformational experience for him living in China and being with people who practice a different faith. He lived with some Buddhists and a Buddhist family, and he noticed how kind they were to one another, how compassionate they were to one another, how forgiving they were of one another, kind of like Christians, he thought to himself. They invited him to go to a Buddhist service, but he thought that was too woo-woo. He wasn't going to do it. But one day, the man in the house invited him to come down into his meditation room. And he sat Bill down and he handed him 2 stones. He said, "If you are prejudiced towards anyone, move them a few inches apart. If you are afraid of any person, place, or thing, again, you must move them apart. If you feel guilty over something you have done in the past, move them again. If you are uncertain about your relationship with a power greater than yourself, move them once again." Finally, the man told Bill, "When you have forgiven yourself and others, when you have recognized that all life is God, that life is within you, then you can bring the blocks together in wholeness. You will feel better, and life henceforth will be more meaningful." And in that moment, it was initially sad for Bill because he felt that he had to give up on his dream to be a minister. He could see the divine expressing in more than one faith, so he felt out of alignment with himself. So he gave up the idea of ministry and went into business for about a decade or so. And then he was invited to see a guy named Ernest Holmes speak at the Wiltern Theater in Los Angeles. And here was this man saying, "There's a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. There is a mystical thread that connects all faiths, that speaks to the central principles of the divine." And then Bill was able to hear that call to ministry again. But I love that story with the Chinese man because it speaks to me of the purpose of religion and the purpose of what we do. As much as I love Dr. Holmes' definition of religious science, for me, our spirituality is all about our relationship with God. It's all about you and the divine. That's what religion is. We can give names to all the cultures and the things people call it, but it really comes down to you and the divine. And what do we have the tendency to do in life? Is we let things get between us. We let the anxiety get between us. We get the sense of unworthiness and let it be between us. We let the resentments and the judgments become so full in our minds that we see ourselves as disconnected from the divine. And what's the other way of saying, bringing those things together? It's about rising above. Rise above your unworthiness and know you are one with God. Rise above the fears and anxieties and know that you are one with God. Rise above the judging and compartmentalizing and demonizing, and know that you are one with God. For that is the truth that sets us free. There are 2 things that I've learned about in this philosophy that I think cause people to move away. And to be honest with you, they're things that I'm still learning. The first is that I thought this philosophy would get rid of my problems for me. That the purpose of a spiritual life is a challenge-free life. Well, unfortunately, this teaching won't get rid of your problems. In fact, it may even amplify them. By that, I don't mean that your problems get worse. I mean that by committing to being mindful, by committing to a spiritual practice, your problems are clearer than ever. And in my life, what I would say is that the loud voices of my limited thinking and my problems have dissipated. They're smaller and smaller. But I can tell you every moment I have the opportunity to choose to slip back into that negative way of thinking. At any point, I can choose to go back into a false version of myself, an old, worn-out version of myself. Our spirituality doesn't remove our challenges for us, but it gives us the tools and the strength to confront any challenge that may come before us so that we can step in and through it with the faith that we have in the virtues of Emmanuel, of God in us, our honesty, our truth, our integrity, our loving and sincere hearts. The other thing that I've learned, and I'm still learning, and I think is perhaps one of the number one reasons people step away from our church, and that is that you cannot be in this teaching and be unworthy. You cannot be in this teaching and be unworthy. You can't say God is all there is and is one with everybody except for me. You can't say I believe in love, truth, and beauty and not know it about yourself. You can't be in touch with God and be out of touch with yourself. And that's what our spirituality demands of us. For me, the God part is easy. I've tried throughout my life to not believe in God. And I can't. I can't not, because I see that sacredness in children's faces and in the good that we can do together as humanity. But I get caught up in that sense of unworthiness. Gene Houston said, "We all have extraordinary encoded within us, waiting to be released." We all have extraordinary encoded within us, waiting to be released. How does it get released? By letting go of that sense of unworthiness, of the fears, of the trepidations, and stepping into the truth that we are a child of God. It may be easy for some of us to accept that we're a child of God, but it's harder to live like it, to know that the love and the peace that you long for are the very truth of your soul, and you only need to accept and embody them to bring them to greater life in all that you do. My theory for myself, I won't say this for you, is that the unworthiness, the anxieties, they don't really belong to me. They're the result of me not stepping into who I am. They're the result of not living in my own vision or a divine vision and living in somebody else's perceived critical notion of who I am. It's about me living down to who I can be. And it's a bizarre thing because it's a kind of selfishness that's really about not being myself. That unworthiness is the bed of that selfishness. And it's an arrogance for me when I get too caught up in it to think that people are judging me all the time or whatever it may be. But when I can step into that grandness of my worth because I'm a child of God, everything changes. Life begins to transform. William Inge once said, "He who will live for others shall have great troubles, but they shall seem to him small. He who will live for himself shall have small troubles, but they shall seem to him great." I am so blessed to have had so many people help awaken me from unworthiness. I remember a teacher handed me a paper with a good grade, and she said, "I'm really interested to see what you wind up doing in 20 years. Me, the kid with spaghetti stains on his pants? Wow." I think of the people who knew I was capable of being successful and living in my truth, who held that truth for me for years and years when I was unable to hold it for myself. Do you have some of those people in your life? I hope so. And I think of the great blessing of being a minister and the hundreds of people who have allowed me to reflect their own wisdom back to them, to represent them in a church. I mean, what an awesome experience. You don't have to be afraid to let go of unworthiness. You don't have to be afraid to let go of fear. All you have to do is be willing to rise above it and stand in the light of your Creator. Stand in the light of the sacred. Be willing to be intimate and vulnerable in this beautiful and amazing life. I'd like to go back, if you don't mind, to that slide of the world. And I don't know about you, but when I see something like that, sometimes I get gripped by a little bit of fear to know that I'm on this planet hurling through space. And one of the reasons I think people sometimes don't like this idea of seeing that the world is just one piece in an infinite sea is that we start to feel insignificant. I don't matter. I'm just this little dot. You can't even see the church on there. I'm that small. But that's where it's important to remember that God is so great, that the sacred is so expansive and infinite, that it knows itself in everywhere and in each and everything. That's how precious the world is. That's how precious you are. I love something that the author Marilyn Robinson said. She said, "We cannot know that conscious life has appeared only on earth, but we have a good ground for assuming that it is rare and extraordinary enough that its vanishing would be an incalculable impoverishment on the sum of things. If we say that, for all we know to the contrary, there is just one minor planet in a limitless field of stars where apple trees blossom and where songs are sung, then most of us would probably grant an important centrality to that planet." To me, that applies not only to our earth, but to each of us. We may seem that we're in a sea of an infinite amount of faces, but there's no face like yours. You may feel an endless sea of lives going all over the place, but there's no life like yours. You may feel insignificant when in awe of all that is taking place around you, but know that you are significant to that divine flow. Know that what you think and what you say and how you choose to live your life matters. For this earth and this divine presence has brought you forth to be and to bring something into this world. That quality of being, that sense of purpose, that heart of being our authentic selves, someone who's never been before and never will be again. That's how precious and awesome each of us is. And we only need to stop the nonsense of stepping into unworthiness and getting stuck in those fears and anxiety to step into what it means to be a thriving child of the divine.